Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. That way, you'll always stay connected to our stories and never miss the next adventure. The Galactic Union vessel Harmonious Endeavor was, by all accounts, a masterpiece of diplomatic engineering. 3 kilometers of polished corridors, crystalline observation decks, and enough protocol officers to staff a small moon. 23 species called it home, at least temporarily, and every single one of them took the concept of decorum so seriously you'd think breathing too loud might trigger an interstellar incident. Naturally, the humans had been aboard for exactly 6 months before everything went sideways. Nico stood in the observation bay, watching stars streak past in that peculiar way they did when you were moving faster than light had any business moving. He was supposed to be reviewing security protocols for the upcoming trade summit. Instead, he was wondering, not for the first time, how he'd gone from teaching arm bars in a gym in São Paulo to babysitting diplomats in space. "You look contemplative," Gemma said, appearing beside him with 2 cups of something that was allegedly coffee but tasted like burnt regret. "That's dangerous." "I'm thinking about quitting," Nico said, accepting the cup anyway. "You say that every Tuesday." "It's Thursday." "My point stands." Gemma took a sip of her own drink and grimaced. "Besides, you can't quit. Duncan bet me 20 credits you'd last the full year without punching anyone important." The Onthari ambassador called humans aggressively vertical yesterday. "Technically accurate. We do stand up a lot." She gestured at the viewport. "Speaking of aggressive verticality, did you hear? The kids are coming aboard." Nico nearly dropped his terrible coffee. "What kids?" "Our kids. Human kids. Cultural exchange program, remember? Command thought it would be nice for the other species to see human family dynamics in action." Gemma's smile was the kind that suggested she knew exactly how bad an idea this was, and was enjoying it immensely. "Ages 8 through 14. 5 of them." 5 children, Nico said slowly. "On a ship where the Chilit think laughter is a threat display, and the Melnids have a 30-page document about acceptable walking speeds in corridors." "Yep. We're doomed." "Probably," Gemma agreed cheerfully, "but at least it'll be entertaining." She was, as it turned out, absolutely right. The children arrived on a Tuesday. Gemma had been wrong about the day, which Nico found oddly satisfying, via shuttle from the human colony ship Perseverance. Nico watched them file into the docking bay and immediately understood that his life was about to become significantly more complicated. Thomas came first, 12 years old, and already walking like he owned the place. He had that particular brand of confidence that came from being the oldest, and assuming that meant he was in charge. Millie followed, 10 years old, compact and spring-loaded, the kind of kid who looked at railings and saw gymnastic equipment. Ravi was 9, distracted, already asking questions about the station's propulsion system before he'd fully cleared the airlock. Deonte, 11, was tall for his age and kept looking around like he was measuring distances, calculating angles. And Noah, 8 years old, tiny, with enormous dark eyes that absorbed everything. "All right," Nico said, clapping his hands once. "Welcome to the Harmonious Endeavor. I'm Nico. I'm supposed to keep you alive and out of trouble." "Those sound like contradictory goals," Thomas observed. Nico decided he liked this kid. "You're not wrong. Ground rules. Don't touch anything that glows. Don't insult anyone's appendages. Don't run in the corridors. The Melnids will literally file a formal complaint. And for the love of everything, don't challenge anyone to a fight." "Why would we do that?" Millie asked, genuinely curious. "I don't know. But you're humans on a diplomatic vessel. We have a track record. The first 3 days went surprisingly well, which should have been Nico's first warning. The kids attended cultural presentations, asked mostly appropriate questions, and only triggered 2 minor diplomatic incidents, both involving Ravi asking about reproductive systems at exactly the wrong moment. Then came day 4. Nico found them because of the noise, not shouting, not fighting, laughing. On a ship where most species considered emotional displays to be mildly scandalous, the sound of children giggling echoed through Corridor 8C like a bizarre alarm. He followed the sound to a sealed storage bay in the recreation wing. The door was open. Security override, he'd have to ask Duncan about that later. And inside, surrounded by crates of equipment marked with symbols from a species Nico didn't recognize, were all 5 children. Wrestling. Not fighting. Not hurting each other. Wrestling. Tomas had Deontay in some kind of headlock. Millie was demonstrating a surprisingly technical hip throw on Ravi, who was trying to calculate the physics mid-flight. Noah was attempting to tackle Thomas from behind and failing because of the height difference, but making up for it with sheer determination. And they were doing it on mats. Proper, high-quality training mats, the kind that cost a fortune back home. Dozens of them, spread across the storage bay floor in a perfect grid. "What?" Nico said carefully. "Is this?" 5 children froze. 5 faces turned toward him with expressions ranging from guilty to defiant. "We found a room," Thomas said, which wasn't technically an answer. "With mats," Millie added helpfully. "Wrestling mats," Ravi clarified, because apparently the specificity mattered. Nico walked into the bay, examining the equipment. The mats were pristine, perfectly preserved, marked with glyphs he didn't recognize. Around them were training dummies, resistance bands, weights calibrated to different gravity levels. This wasn't just storage. This was a complete combat training facility. "Where did this come from?" he asked. "The manifest says, Dorothy." Duncan's voice crackled over Nico's comm. Of course, the engineer was monitoring. "Warrior species. Went extinct about 200 years ago. Looks like the Union preserved their training equipment for historical purposes, and then forgot about it." Nico looked at the children. They looked back. Noah was still clinging to Thomas's leg. He should shut this down. File a report. Return the children to supervised areas and seal the bay. Instead, he heard himself say, "Okay, but if you're going to do this, we're doing it properly." Thomas blinked. "Really?" "Really. First rule, technique over strength. Second rule, tap out means stop immediately. No exceptions. Third rule, respect your opponent. You're not trying to hurt each other. You're trying to learn control." Nico stepped onto the mats, feeling the familiar give under his feet. "Millie, show me that throw again. Your hip placement was off." For the next hour, Nico did something he hadn't done in months. He taught. Proper falls, basic positions, the difference between a hold and a hurt. The children absorbed it like sponges, asking questions, trying techniques, laughing when they messed up. He didn't notice they had an audience until Gemma cleared her throat from the doorway. Standing behind her, all 6 limbs frozen in what might have been shock or horror, was Gormesh, the Chillit ambassador. His mantis-like features twitched, compound eyes reflecting the overhead lights in a way that suggested deep existential distress. "Security Chief Nico," Gormesh said, his voice like wind through crystal chimes. "What is the meaning of this exercise program?" Nico supplied. "Supervised recreational activity. The young humans are engaged in combat. They're engaged in grappling. There's a difference. They are attempting to immobilize each other through application of force." "Well," Nico said. Yes, that's kind of the point. Gormesh's limbs shivered. This is barbaric, dangerous, philosophically concerning. Noah chose that exact moment to successfully sweep Ravi's leg, sending him tumbling onto the mat with a laugh. Ravi immediately tried to analyze what had gone wrong with his base, talking through the physics while Noah sat on his chest, looking triumphant. "Does that look dangerous to you?" Nico asked. Gormesh stared. They are. The smaller one has achieved dominance through leverage and timing rather than size advantage. Exactly. That's the whole point. It's not about being strong. It's about being smart. But the purpose is still to defeat an opponent. The purpose, Gemma interjected, is to understand yourself and your capabilities, to learn how your body moves, to build confidence through controlled challenge. She smiled. Also, it's fun. Gormesh's limbs twitched again. Fun? You consider voluntary combat to be fun? Don't your people do anything physical for enjoyment? Nico asked. We appreciate the aesthetic beauty of coordinated movement. We do not attempt to forcibly relocate each other's center of gravity. Your loss, Tomas called from across the room, where he was now teaching Deontay a basic escape from side control. Gormesh watched for another long moment, then turned and left without another word, his limbs clicking against the deck plating in what Nico was pretty sure was agitation. That's going to be a problem, Gemma observed. Probably, Nico agreed. But look at them. The children had gone back to training, completely absorbed. Millie was demonstrating her gymnastics background with a roll that transitioned into a scramble. Ravi was explaining leverage ratios to anyone who would listen. Noah was attempting a submission she'd seen Nico do, getting the concept right, even if the execution was still rough. Yeah, Gemma said softly. Okay, I'll run interference with the diplomatic corps. You keep them safe. Always do. She left, and Nico returned to teaching. He showed them how to break falls, how to tap out properly. The importance of control, of knowing when to push and when to stop. The kids learned fast, faster than most of his adult students back home. He didn't know it then, but this moment, 5 human children wrestling on forgotten mats in a storage bay, was about to change everything. Again. Because humans, as the galaxy was slowly learning, had a particular talent for finding the things everyone else had forgotten, dusting them off, and accidentally starting revolutions. This one just happened to smell like sweat and sound like laughter. 3 days later, the storage bay had been officially reclassified as Human Cultural Recreation Space 12D, which was bureaucratic speak for, we give up, just don't break anything important. The kids still came every day, but now they had company. Nico arrived for the morning session to find Duncan already on the mats, showing Thomas the finer points of Greco-Roman wrestling. The engineer moved with surprising grace for a man who spent most of his time elbow-deep in engine components. Didn't know you grappled, Nico said. Duncan executed a textbook body lock, lifting Thomas clean off the mat before setting him down gently. University team. Long time ago. He grinned. Figured the kids could use some variety in their education. By the end of the week, Gemma had joined in too, demonstrating judo principles to Millie and Noah. It's all about using your opponent's energy against them, she explained, showing a basic hip throw in slow motion. Size doesn't matter if you understand momentum. Millie's eyes lit up. Like gymnastics, you're just redirecting force. Exactly like gymnastics. The real surprise came when Yuki walked in on day 8, watched for approximately 90 seconds, then calmly removed her jacket and asked Nico if he remembered the triangle choke from guard. You do jujitsu? Nico asked, genuinely shocked. Brown belt, Yuki said, dropping into a cross-legged position on the mat with practiced ease. Thought you knew. How would I possibly know that? You're security. Aren't you supposed to know everything? She waved Ravi over. Come here. Let me show you something cool about leverage and human anatomy. Within 2 weeks, the morning sessions had become an institution. The kids came. The adults came. Someone, Nico suspected Duncan, had quietly moved additional mats from storage and set them up in the corner of Recreation Area 5B. Then someone else did the same in the observation deck's exercise space. The mats, it seemed, were multiplying. So were the participants. And that's when things got really interesting. The first alien to show genuine interest was, ironically, related to their biggest critic. Nico was demonstrating mount escapes to Deonte when he noticed her watching from the doorway. Small for a cheetah, maybe adolescent by their standards, all 6 limbs tucked close to her body, in a posture that suggested uncertainty. Can I help you? Nico called. The young cheetah's limbs fluttered. I am Miriam. I was observing. Observations free. Participation's more fun. My uncle, Ambassador Gormesh, he says this is dangerous, primitive. Your uncle's filed 16 safety complaints in the past week. We're aware of his concerns. Nico stood, brushing off his pants. What do you think? Miriam's compound eyes reflected the overhead lights, shifting colors Nico couldn't quite interpret. I think it looks like you are learning to control your bodies, to understand limits. My uncle speaks of danger, but I see no injuries. That's because we're careful, controlled. Want to try? 3 of Miriam's limbs twitched forward before she pulled them back. I am not certain my physiology is compatible. Only one way to find out. Nico gestured to the mat. Basic position. You try to maintain base. That means balance, and I'll try to disrupt it. Gentle. No strikes, no pain. Just movement and pressure. If it doesn't work, we stop. Miriam approached like someone walking toward a cliff edge. She stepped onto the mat, limbs spreading for stability. Nico had to admit, 6 points of contact made for an interesting base. He applied gentle pressure to her forward limbs. She adjusted, compensating with her rear limbs. He shifted his weight, testing her balance. She countered, actually using her multiple limbs to create a tripod effect that was remarkably stable. Huh, Nico said. That's actually brilliant. You've got built-in redundancy. The leverage is different than I anticipated, Miriam said, and Nico could hear something like excitement in her crystalline voice. When you push here, I can redirect using this limb while maintaining balance with these 2. She experimented, shifting her weight, testing ranges of motion. Thomas wandered over, fascinated. Can you grab with all 6? He asked. Yes, though the forward limbs are stronger. So you could theoretically maintain a hold with 4 limbs while defending with 2? Miriam's eyes shifted color again. I had not considered that application. By the end of the session, Miriam had learned basic concepts of base and pressure, and Nico had learned that cheetah flexibility was absolutely absurd. The kids were already theorizing about 6-limbed guard positions. She left without a word, limbs moving in what Nico was starting to recognize as thoughtful patterns. She came back the next day, and the day after that. The floodgates, apparently, had opened. Orlick appeared on day 16. Young, by Renthian standards, maybe equivalent to a human in their early 20s. 4-armed, covered in tawny fur that caught the light like silk, with those distinctive golden eyes that marked his species. He didn't ask permission. He just stepped onto the mat, looked at Nico, and said, "Teach me." straight to the point. I respect that. Nico stood. You know this is going to ruffle some important fur, right? Your people are big on dignity and protocol. My people, Orlik said quietly, used to be warriors. 1,000 years ago, before the Union, before peace. We fought with honor, with skill. Then we evolved beyond it, or so we tell ourselves. His forearms spread in a gesture Nico couldn't read. But sometimes, I feel like we didn't evolve beyond, we just forgot. Buried it under diplomacy and procedure. And you want to remember. I want to understand what we were, what we could be. Orlik's voice dropped. Is that wrong? Nico thought about every diplomat he'd escorted, every careful conversation about human, aggressive tendencies, every suggestion that maybe humanity should be a little less physical, a little more refined. No, he said, it's not wrong. Get into a basic stance. Teaching Orlik was like teaching someone who'd been designed for this. 4 arms meant double the gripping options, double the framing possibilities. His natural strength was impressive, but he had the discipline to control it, to learn technique before power. Within an hour, he'd grasped concepts that took most people weeks. Your people really were warriors, Nico observed, showing him how to transition from a standing clinch to a takedown. We tell ourselves we evolved beyond violence, Orlik said, executing the technique with precision. But I think we just got scared of ourselves, decided being civilized meant being soft. He straightened, all 4 arms moving through defensive positions. This doesn't feel violent. It feels right. Word spread the way secrets always do on a closed ship, quickly and chaotically. Nung appeared next, a young Onthari, whose slug-like body moved in ways that defied normal physics. The philosophical species that found voluntary combat disturbing sent one of their youth to investigate. My elders say, struggle is meaningless, Nung said in their wet, burbling voice. But I think they mean uncontrolled struggle. This seems controlled. It is? Gemma confirmed. She'd become the unofficial alien liaison for the wrestling program. It's consensual, structured challenge. You can stop any time. Nung's gelatinous body rippled. May I attempt this consensual challenge? Teaching a being with no rigid skeleton to grapple was an education in humility. Nung could flow around holds, compress their body to escape positions that would trap any human. But they could also be pinned if you understood their density and applied the right pressure. This is fascinating, Nung burbled after their first session. Direct physical problem-solving. My philosophy speaks of understanding through experience. This is the most direct experience possible. Even Grant showed up, a Melnid, all crystalline angles and mathematical precision. He didn't want to participate at first, just observe and calculate. The physics are remarkable, he said, his voice like wind chimes. The angles, the leverage ratios, the transfer of momentum. It's applied geometry in real time. Want to feel it instead of calculating it? Nico offered. Grant's crystalline structure shifted colors, pale blue to amber. That seems inefficient. Try it anyway. 5 minutes later, Grant was on the mat, experiencing firsthand how a basic arm drag worked, his mathematical mind racing to reconcile theory with practice. The calculations are correct, he said, wonder in his chiming voice. But experiencing the force application is entirely different from predicting it. I need to recalculate everything. By week 3, Corridor 12D had become something unprecedented on the harmonious endeavor. A place where species mixed not for diplomatic necessity, but for genuine shared interest. Humans teaching aliens, aliens teaching each other. Everyone learning that controlled physical challenge wasn't barbaric. It was fascinating. The morning sessions grew. The afternoon sessions appeared spontaneously. Nico would walk past Recreation Area 5B and find Orlick showing Miriam how Renthian four-armed clinches worked, while Thomas filmed it for analysis later. He'd pass the observation deck and see Nung and Deonte working on some bizarre collaboration where the Onthari's flexibility combined with human technique to create positions that shouldn't exist. Every corridor, it seemed, had someone somewhere working through a technique, testing a theory, laughing at a failed attempt. It was beautiful. It was also, Nico knew, too good to last. The complaints had been building. Gormesh filed his 17th safety analysis. The Onthari elders submitted a formal philosophical objection. The Melnid Council requested a statistical review of injury probability. And Captain Drell Knox, who'd been conspicuously silent on the matter, finally called a formal hearing. The message came on a Thursday morning. All human personnel involved in physical training activities report to Council Chamber 1. 1,400 hours. Attendance mandatory. Gemma read it over Nico's shoulder and whistled low. Well, that's not ominous at all. Think they're shutting us down? I think they're about to try. Nico looked across the training bay, where Millie was teaching Miriam a basic sprawl, while Orlick and Duncan discussed wrestling philosophy, and Noah attempted to explain the concept of fun to a very confused Grant. Let them try, he said. Council Chamber 1 was designed to intimidate. Vaulted ceilings that disappeared into shadow, seating arranged in concentric circles like an amphitheater, lighting that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Representatives from all 23 member species occupied the upper tiers, looking down at the single platform in the center where the accused, because that's what this was, really, stood to face judgment. Nico had been in combat sports long enough to recognize a rigged match when he saw one. The human delegation stood on the platform. Nico, Gemma, Duncan, Yuki, and, because apparently the council wanted maximum drama, all 5 children. Thomas stood straight-backed, defiant. Millie kept shifting her weight, like she was ready to move. Ravi looked around with scientific curiosity. Deonte's jaw was set. Noah gripped Nico's hand. Captain Drell Knox presided from the highest seat, her 4 arms resting on the armrests of her throne, golden eyes unreadable. To her right sat Gormesh, practically vibrating with vindication. To her left, an elderly Onthari named Muth, their slug body pulsing with slow, ponderous authority. This hearing, Drell Knox began, her voice carrying effortlessly through the chamber, concerns the unauthorized implementation of combat training protocols aboard this vessel. The human delegation will answer for their actions. Unauthorized, Duncan muttered. We filed the recreational activity permits. Gemma elbowed him silent. Gormesh rose, all 6 limbs spreading in a gesture that looked like an opening argument and a threat display combined. Honored council members, what we have witnessed over the past 3 weeks is nothing less than the systematic introduction of violence as recreation. The humans have transformed sacred diplomatic spaces into arenas of combat. They have encouraged our youth to engage in physical conflict. They have... Encouraged, Thomas interrupted, and Nico nearly had a heart attack. Nobody encouraged anybody. We asked to learn. Drell Knox's head tilted. The young one speaks. Explain. Ambassador Gormesh keeps using words like violence and combat and conflict, Thomas said, and his voice didn't shake even a little. Nico felt a surge of pride. But that's not what we're doing. We're wrestling. It's different. How? Muth burbled from their position. Is voluntary physical struggle different from violence? Because violence is about hurting someone, Millie said, stepping forward. Wrestling is about understanding yourself, about learning what your body can do, about respect. Respect? Gormesh's limbs clicked together skeptically. You pin each other to the ground. You force submission through applied pressure. This demonstrates respect? Yes, Yuki said calmly. It does. When two people grapple, they're having a conversation. A physical one. You learn how strong they are, how they move, how they think. And they learn the same about you. There's no lying on the mat. You either understand the technique, or you don't. You either respect your partner's tap-out, or you don't. It's one of the most honest interactions two beings can have. Philosophical justifications aside, Gormesh continued, his voice hardening. The statistical reality remains. Combat training leads to injury. Injury leads to medical complications. The humans have introduced an unnecessary risk factor to a controlled environment. Show them, Gemma said quietly to Nico. Nico pulled up his data pad, projecting the statistics into the center of the chamber. Injury report from the past 3 weeks. Total participants across all species, 63. Total training hours logged, 412. Total injuries requiring medical intervention, 0. Minor incidents. Mat burns, mild muscle soreness, 18. All human. Conclusion. This is statistically safer than walking in the corridors. That last part was actually true. The Melnid insistence on precise walking speeds had resulted in 22 collision incidents in the same time period. Statistics can be manipulated, Gormesh said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. My niece, he continued, and now there was something else in his tone, concern, maybe, or fear, has been participating in these sessions. She returns to quarters physically exhausted, speaking in terms of leverage and technique. This is not appropriate behavior for a Keelit youth. Why not? The voice came from the entrance. Miriam entered the chamber, moving with a confidence Nico hadn't seen in her before. All 6 limbs carried her forward in smooth, coordinated strides. She climbed onto the platform without asking permission. Niece, Gormesh started. Uncle, you filed 17 complaints about danger and barbarism. You wrote 200 pages analyzing injury probability. You attended 3 emergency sessions arguing for prohibition. Miriam's limbs spread in what Nico now recognized as a Keelit challenge posture. But you never once asked me what I learned. The chamber went silent. I learned, Miriam continued, that my body is capable of things I never imagined. That 6 limbs aren't a peculiarity. They're an advantage if I understand how to use them. I learned that being smaller doesn't mean being weaker if you understand leverage. I learned that the best way to understand another being isn't through formal diplomatic exchange. It's through honest physical challenge, where neither of you can hide behind words. She turned to face the council. You say this is inappropriate? I say spending my entire youth in climate-controlled chambers, learning protocols and procedures, never testing my limits, never understanding what my body can do. That's inappropriate. The humans gave me something none of our carefully structured education ever did. They gave me confidence. Gormesh's limbs had gone completely still. You could have been injured. I could be injured walking down a corridor, Miriam countered. The Melnid collision statistics prove that. At least on the mats, I'm learning to fall properly. Movement at another entrance. Orlik entered, and he wasn't alone. Behind him were a dozen other young aliens, Renthians, Keelits, 2 more Onthari, even a Melnid. This isn't just about humans anymore, Orlik said, moving to join Miriam on the platform. The space was getting crowded. This is about what we're discovering about ourselves. Drelnox leaned forward, 4 arms gripping her armrests. You speak boldly, young Orlick. Does your father know you're here? My father, a deep voice rumbled from the upper tier, knows exactly where I am. Nico's head snapped up. Council member Drell Sean, Orlick's father, one of the most senior Renthian diplomats in the Union, stood from his seat. He was imposing even by Renthian standards, his forearms thick with muscle gone soft from decades of diplomatic service, his golden eyes sharp. My son came to me 5 days ago, Drell Sean said, his voice carrying the weight of authority, and asked me to train with him. I was angry at first, horrified that he'd been engaging in what I considered primitive behavior, unbecoming of our station. He descended the stairs, each step deliberate. So I demanded he demonstrate what he'd learned. The council member reached the platform. He looked at Nico, then at his son. He took me down in 4 seconds. Gasps rippled through the chamber. A council member, taken down by a youth. The scandal of it. And in that moment, Drelshan continued, feeling the mat against my back, my son's technique perfectly executed, I felt something I hadn't felt in 30 years. I felt alive. I felt like a Renthian, not just a representative of Renthians. His forearms spread wide. So, I asked him to teach me more. You've been training? Drelnox asked, and Nico couldn't tell if she was shocked or amused. Every night for the past 5 days, in Cargo Bay 8, where no one would see a council member rolling around on mats like a youngling. Drelshan's laugh was bitter. We spent 1,000 years evolving beyond our warrior nature. We told ourselves we were better, more civilized, but we didn't evolve. We just got soft, comfortable. We forgot what it meant to be challenged, to struggle, to test ourselves against real resistance. He turned to face the full council. These humans haven't brought violence to our ship. They've brought honesty, and we're terrified of it, because it reminds us what we used to be, what we could still be. This is madness, Muth burbled. Physical struggle is philosophically regressive. The Onthari transcended such base needs millennia ago. Did we? Nung emerged from the crowd, their gelatinous form rippling. Or did we just decide that thinking was superior to doing, and built an entire philosophy around our own limitations? They flowed onto the platform, joining the growing crowd. I have learned more about our philosophical concepts of flow, adaptation, and understanding through 3 weeks of wrestling than through 20 years of meditation. The mathematical applications alone, Grant began, are irrelevant. Gormesh's voice cracked like breaking crystal. You speak of learning, of growth, of understanding. But at what cost? We are diplomats, philosophers, scientists. We are not warriors. Why? Nico said quietly, and somehow his voice cut through the chaos. Can't we be both? The chamber fell silent. Every species here has a history, Nico continued. You all evolved from something. Predators, prey, survivors. You all had to struggle to get where you are. Then you got civilized, joined the Union, and decided that struggle was beneath you. That being evolved meant being soft. He gestured at the children, at the young aliens, at Drelshan. But these people, these beings, they're discovering that you can be civilized and strong, diplomatic and capable, thoughtful and physical. It's not regression, it's integration. Security Chief Nico speaks wisdom, Drelnox said, and her voice silenced everyone. The captain rose from her throne, descending the steps with fluid grace. 4 arms moved in patterns Nico couldn't interpret. This council will take a brief recess. 15 minutes. Then we vote. She left through a private exit. The chamber erupted into conversation. Gemma grabbed Nico's arm. That went better than expected. Or worse. Can't tell yet. Did you see Gormesh's face when Miriam called him out? Did you see Drelshan admit he's been training? Duncan laughed. A council member. On the mats. Yuki was already talking to Nung about philosophical implications. The children clustered together, whispering. The young aliens stood with them, a mixed group that wouldn't have existed a month ago. The 15 minutes felt like 15 hours. When Drelnox returned, her face was unreadable. She climbed back to her throne, 4 arms settling into position. This council has debated the matter of human combat training protocols, she announced. We have heard arguments for prohibition. We have heard arguments for continuation. We have heard testimony from youth who claim benefit, and from elders who claim concern. She paused, and Nico held his breath. Before we vote, Drelnox continued, I have a confession to make. The captain stood, and in one fluid motion, removed her formal diplomatic robes. Underneath, she wore simple training clothes. The chamber exploded into shocked silence. I have been training with the humans for 6 days, Drelnox said calmly. In secret. Because I needed to understand what my crew was experiencing, what the youth were learning, what had sparked such controversy. She descended the stairs again, approaching Nico directly. And what I learned, she said, her golden eyes meeting his, is that I have been captain of this vessel for 20 years. I have negotiated treaties, prevented conflicts, maintained order. But I have not felt truly alive, truly myself, until I stepped onto those mats. She turned to face the council. The vote is mine to call, and I call it now. All in favor of prohibiting human combat training protocols? Silence. Even Gormesh didn't raise a limb. All in favor of legitimizing and regulating these protocols as official recreational activities. Arms, limbs, appendages rose across the chamber. Not all of them. Some species still held reservations. But enough. More than enough. Gormesh sat frozen, all 6 limbs trembling. Then, slowly, he lowered his head. Abstained. The measure passes, Drelnox announced. The humans may continue their training, under supervision, with proper safety protocols, and open to any species who wishes to participate. She looked at Nico and smiled. Actually smiled. Now, teach me that triangle choke properly. I couldn't get the angle right. The training bay, officially designated Interspecies Physical Development Center Alpha, because the Union loved bureaucratic titles, had expanded to occupy half of Deck 12. New mats arrived weekly, shipped in from human colonies with notes like, "Heard you're teaching aliens to grapple? This is the best thing we've ever heard," and "Give them hell." 2 months after the hearing, Nico stood at the edge of the main training area and tried to process what his life had become. On Mat Section 1, Gemma was teaching a mixed group of Chilits and humans the principles of judo. Miriam demonstrated a throw on Thomas, her 6 limbs creating angles that shouldn't work, but somehow did. 3 other young Chilits watched with rapt attention. Their compound eyes shifting colors in patterns Nico had learned meant extreme focus. Mat Section 2 belonged to Duncan and the Renthians. Orlick and his father grappled in the center while a half-dozen other 4-armed diplomats watched, taking notes. Drelshan had lost 15 pounds and gained back something that looked like youth. He moved differently now, not like a politician playing at fitness, but like someone remembering what their body was built for. "Your base is too narrow," Duncan said, demonstrating on a young Renthian named Torvik. 4 arms mean you can threaten from more angles, but you need the lower body stability to support it. Like this. Mat Section 3 was pure chaos. Yuki had somehow convinced 5 Melnids that grappling was applied physics, and now they approached every technique like a mathematical proof that needed solving. Grant had created spreadsheets. There were diagrams. Ravi had found his people, and they were reverse engineering the arm triangle choke using geometric principles. The angle of compression relative to the arterial flow creates a pressure differential that... Grant's chiming voice competed with Ravi's enthusiastic explanation of blood flow dynamics. And in the corner, on a specially designed mat with different density properties, Nung was teaching Millie and Noah the Anthari approach to grappling, which turned out to be less about holds and more about flow, about becoming water that slipped through defenses. "Stop thinking about positions," Nung burbled, their gelatinous body demonstrating an escape that defied physics. "Think about spaces. Wherever there's space, you can flow." Noah tried it, her small size actually an advantage, slipping out of Millie's hold in a way that made the older girl laugh with delight. "That's basically what we do," Millie said. "In gymnastics, we're always looking for spaces to move through." "Then we are speaking the same language," Nung replied, just with different words. Captain Drellnox entered through the main doors, and the energy in the room shifted. Not fearful, but respectful. The captain had become a regular presence, training 3 times a week, usually with Nico or Gemma. She'd gotten good, scary good. 4 Renthian arms combined with natural athleticism and the intensity of someone making up for lost decades. "Security Chief Nico," she said formally, though her eyes were warm. "A moment?" They stepped into the observation room, where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the training area. Drellnox watched her crew. Multiple species, multiple ages, all moving together in purposeful chaos. "I received a communication from the Union Science Directorate," she said. "They want to study what's happening here." Nico's stomach dropped. "Study it how?" "Observational research. They're fascinated by the cross-species participation, the psychological effects, the physiological adaptations. Apparently, 3 separate departments want to write papers." She smiled. "They're calling it the harmonious endeavor effect." "That sounds ominous." "On the contrary, it sounds like validation." Drellnox gestured at the training floor. "Do you know what the Union Medical Council reported last week? Across all species participating in the program, they've seen a 23% decrease in stress-related medical complaints, 31% improvement in crew cohesion scores, and youth participants show marked increases in confidence and cross-cultural competency." "You're saying wrestling is making people better at their jobs?" "I'm saying that physical challenge creates bonds that diplomacy alone cannot. When Gormesh's niece takes down my nephew on the mat, they learn more about each other than 100 formal cultural exchanges could teach them." Drellnox's 4 arms crossed in a gesture Nico recognized as satisfaction. "The IDA Directorate wants to expand the program. Other ships, stations, perhaps even planetary installations." Nico looked at the training floor, at Thomas teaching Deontay a wrestling concept while 3 Chilits watched and took notes, at Duncan and Drellshon laughing about something, 4 armed and 2 armed brothers in sweat, at Yuki explaining leverage to beings who calculated in dimensions humans couldn't perceive. "This wasn't supposed to be a revolution," he said quietly. "It was just supposed to keep some kids entertained." The best revolutions never start on purpose. Drellnox moved to stand beside him. They start When someone finds something real in a galaxy full of artificial constructs, you gave them something the Union spent centuries trying to engineer through policy and protocol. Genuine understanding. By teaching them to fight. By teaching them to be honest with each other in the most fundamental way possible. She turned to face him fully. The Union has a proposal. They want you to develop a curriculum, a formal training program that can be adapted across species. They're offering to make you Director of Interspecies Physical Development. Nico stared. I teach arm bars in São Paulo. I'm not qualified to... You created something unprecedented. You took an ancient human practice and made it universal. You're the most qualified person in the galaxy. Drellnox's golden eyes held his. And the compensation would be substantial. On the mat, Deontay had just successfully executed a throw on Orlick, and both species were laughing about the physics of it. Noah was attempting to explain the concept of fun to a very serious young Melnid who kept trying to quantify the emotional response. I need to think about it, Nico said. Take your time. The offer won't expire. Drellnox moved toward the door, then paused. Though I should mention, Gormesh has stopped filing complaints. He filed an application instead. For himself. What? He wants to learn. Says he needs to understand what his niece sees in it. Also says that if the Union is legitimizing this, he wants to ensure proper Chilit participation and representation. A smile played at the corner of Drellnox's mouth. I believe his exact words were, if this barbarism is to become institutionalized, the Chilit people should at least do it correctly. She left, and Nico stood alone in the observation room, watching the organized chaos below. Gemma appeared beside him, somehow knowing exactly when he needed company. Big thoughts? They want to expand this. Make it official. Across the whole Union. And you're worried it'll lose something if it gets too structured. Aren't you? Gemma watched Millie teach a hip escape to Miriam, while Nung provided commentary about flow and adaptation. I think the moment we decided to teach kids in a storage bay, we stopped being in control of where this goes. It's bigger than us now. That's what worries me. That's what makes it matter. She bumped his shoulder. You know what Duncan said yesterday? He said, this is the first time in 20 years of Union service that he feels like people see him as a person instead of a human. And Orlick told me that training with his father has given them more genuine conversation than the previous decade combined. Whatever this becomes, it's already changed things. On the mat, Captain Drellnox had stepped out onto the floor, greeting the participants. Young Renthians straightened with respect. Keelits adjusted their limbs in formal greeting, and then she bowed to Yuki, a student acknowledging a teacher, and dropped into ready position. The training continued. Species mixed, techniques evolved, understanding grew. You're going to say yes, Gemma observed, to the director position. Probably, Nico admitted, but only if they let me keep teaching. The moment it becomes all administration and no mat time, I'm out. Deal. Now get down there. Gormesh just walked in, and I think he's actually nervous. Nico looked. Sure enough, the Chilit ambassador stood at the entrance, all 6 limbs held in a posture that suggested profound uncertainty. Miriam approached him, spoke quietly, gestured to the mats. Gormesh's limbs trembled. Then, slowly, he removed his formal diplomatic robes. Underneath, he wore simple training clothes. Nico grinned and headed for the stairs. He had an ambassador to teach, a program to build, and a galaxy to accidentally revolutionize. One role at a time.